explanation about O'Donnell Boo? Okay, you're up. This is Liam Murphy, and Liam is joining us from White Plains. Drove up last night, got here really late, woke up really early, and we put this program together. It's been a little longer than that, but thank you, Liam.
Thank you. Now, I've never been to Troy before, and what a welcome! Wow, really nice. But we're really here not about my travels, but for Thomas Kelley. Thomas J. Kelley was part of the founding leadership of what would become known in song and story as the Bold Fenian Men. And he has the distinction of being a hero of two countries. A native of Mount Bellew, County Galway, and, like Ken Tierney of the Fort Worth Five, educated in St. Charles College, Tuam, where among his teachers was Michael J. McCann, a regular contributor to The Nation, which was edited originally by the great nationalist poet Thomas Davis. McCann wrote O'Donnell Boo, a stirring war song set in 16th century Ireland, which was so popular among Irish throughout the world that it was regarded for a time as a virtual Irish national anthem. Thomas Kelley had seen the repeal movement, and he attended, along with some 40,000 others, a monster meeting in Caltra on the 21st of May, 1843. He also witnessed the Great Hunger and the Rising of 1848, with trials, speeches from the dock, and exile of many leaders. He witnessed this firsthand, but, like Robert Emmet in 1798, was apparently too young and too careful to attract the attention of the constabulary in 1848. After his classical, theological, and nationalist education at St. Charles, where he mastered not only the Gospel according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but also the Gospel of Tone, Thomas Kelley apprenticed to the printer's trade in Kelly's The Business of a Relation in Loughrea. His apprenticeship complete, he emigrated to America, the land of opportunity, in 1851. Directly, he fell in with 1848 exiles in New York. His rapid acceptance into the leadership of the Republican movement is testimony not only to his ability and dedication, but also to the credentials and recommendations which must have accompanied him in the 48 men at home. Thomas Kelley participated both in the Emmett Monument Association. Now, the Emmett Monument Association is named for Robert Emmet. Okay? It has nothing to do with raising money to put up a statue or anything like that. Robert Emmet, although he was not noticed in 1798, was the leader of a failed rising in 1803. Because he came from a good family, he got a trial before execution. And I know a lot of people who have memorized his speech from the dock. I won't give you the whole thing, but his final words were, "Not until my country takes its place among the nations of the world, let my epitaph be written." So obviously the only way we can write the epitaph for Robert Emmet is to free Ireland. That's what he's asking for, and any Anglos listening hadn't a clue what he was talking about. But he was also in the New York State Militia and associated with Doheny and Corcoran, both officers of the 69th. In the absence of any definitive documentation, we cannot say for sure that Kelley was then in the 69th. He was assigned to help Michael Doheny organize the 75th New York. Now, where do these numbers come from? Okay. The number 9 has great mystical value in Ireland. If you're on the west coast of Ireland and the highest hill, and you're counting the number of waves until the horizon, 9 is the number. Beyond 9, another world. So, the 1st Regiment decided to call itself the 9th. But there was already a 9th. However, they had enough political clout. The fellas in the then 9th were convinced to become the new 8th, and they took over the number 9. Now, the 2nd Regiment, they were sorry they didn't get to be the 9th, but they said, we'll be the 69th. That way, even upside down, we've got a 9. The 3rd Regiment, we're still waiting for them to report back from Brooklyn that they have enough to man a regiment. But the 4th Regiment, which we have our man helping to organize, the 75th. Where is 75 in Ireland? And the answer is 75 is very familiar as soon as you think about Lexington and Concord, the first time Americans fired upon British forces. Lexington and Concord. So 75 calls into memory the idea that Americans can shoot English soldiers. And now, the enlisted rosters for the 1850s have not survived, not in the New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs, nor in the archives of the New York Historical Society, nor in the records of the 69th Regiment of New York. That's the enlisted records. So, while all the circumstantial evidence points to the 69th, it cannot be claimed as a certainty that Kelley was in the 69th. However, we fell on economic hard times in this country in 1857, and they continued into the next year. So, the 9th and the 75th, they all shrunk. The 9th shrunk, the 75th shrunk, and the 69th even shrunk a little bit. So the other two were subsumed into the 69th. So now, therefore, Kelley can be and is claimed by the 69th. This is for the Chief of Army History, okay? Brigadier General Jack Mountcastle, my brother Rat and fellow company member from VMI. So when I called up to find out what was going on, the number one guy in Army history was a personal friend. He made sure that the research was done by his best people and that he wasn't just making it up. It was confirmed that Kelley can be regarded as part of the 69th. But the only problem I had with that was that all happened after we got him a new tombstone. And I didn't want to carve anything in the stone on the tombstone that I couldn't document. So, but that is being remedied here today and in the other work being done by Erica. Now, what is certain is that thanks to the opportunity presented by the New York State Militia, Thomas Kelley was both a student and a practitioner of the military art. A co-founder of the Fenian Brotherhood, Thomas Kelley later moved to Tennessee to start and edit the Nashville Evening Democrat. The large number of Fenians found in Nashville after the war suggested that he busied himself with more than journalism. It is said that the flag on his newspaper office was the last Stars and Stripes in Nashville to come down after the secession of Tennessee. Hold it. Now, like many other Fenians, Thomas Kelley answered Lincoln's call for volunteers to fight to preserve the United States. A personal friend and a political and conspiratorial associate of Michael Corcoran, Thomas Kelley was preparing to return to New York to the 69th when he was introduced to a new Irish regiment the 10th Ohio Volunteer Infantry and threw in his lot with them. The 10th Ohio was originally enlisted for 3 months and then re-enlisted for an additional 3 years. A member of Company C, his military knowledge and ability having been recognized, Kelley was promoted to orderly sergeant. Although receiving what should have been a $1 million wound in the Battle of Carnifex Ferry in Western Virginia on the 10th of September, 1861, Thomas Kelley volunteered to return to duty before the end of the year. Kelley had been shot through the jaw by a bullet that destroyed part of his jaw and 3 teeth, and then narrowly escaping the carotid artery lodged in the muscles of the left side of his neck, from which it was removed surgically. It is possible that the goatee, which appears in all of his pictures, was not only in fashion in the 1860s, but also hid what could have been a disfiguring scar. On 29 September 1861, Colonel William Little, commander of the 10th Regiment, Ohio Volunteer Infantry, wrote to the Adjutant General of Ohio, Sir C.P. Buckingham, stating that there was a vacancy in the office of second lieutenant in Company C, and that Thomas J. Kelley had been nominated to fill the vacancy by a large majority of the company, and that Kelley had conducted himself with utmost gallantry during the entire Battle of Carnifex Ferry. He also stated that Kelley, as orderly sergeant, was intimately acquainted with the internal economy of the company and the duties of the officer position. He requested that the governor issue Kelley his commission without delay, despite the fact that Kelley had gone to the military hospital in Cincinnati. Kelley was commissioned in January of 1862 and later seconded, that is S-E-C-U-N-D-E-D, seconded to the staff of Major General George Thomas, later the Rock of Chickamauga, the 14th Corps, United States Army of the Cumberland, as a signal officer. He was promoted to captain on the 17th of March. What's the 17th of March? Exactly. Okay. There's a message in that. That's when they chose to make him a captain. So he became the chief signal officer for the Corps. During this period, his regimental commander requested his reassignment back to the 10th Ohio in order that he might take command of one of the regiment's maneuver battalions, which would probably have entailed at least a temporary promotion to major or lieutenant colonel. General Thomas refused the request, writing that he could not spare Kelley from his duties. Now, the United States Army, or I should say the Army of the United States, had a regimental system whereby personnel seconded to other units were still carried on the rolls. On 30 April 1863, Kelley was administratively transferred on the books of the 10th Ohio from Company C to Company I, while continuing to serve in the 14th Corps headquarters. It should also be noted that as a chief signal officer, Kelley was well situated to maintain communications with Fenians in the Army of the Cumberland. So he could wear 2 hats, but only one of them would show. Unfortunately, General Thomas' needs for Kelley's services was trumped by a new Army regulation requiring that all officers in the Signal Corps have university degrees by the following February. And a war on. Going to stop the war and go to school? Come on. Anyhow, this being the case, although too late for battalion command, Kelley again requested transfer back to his regiment. On the 19th of August, 1863, he was ordered to return to the Bloody 10th as Captain Company I, from which he was later mustered out with the rest of the 10th Ohio. His military service continued in the Fenian Brotherhood, which is the Irish Republican Army. American Fenian uniform buttons bore the letters IRA. With the end of the American Civil War in 1865, the Fenian Brotherhood in America sent its most trusted military officer, Captain Thomas Kelley, home to Ireland to assess the prospects for a rising and to advise on military matters. By summer of 1865, John Devoy was convinced that the time was ripe for a rising. The Fenian chief, James Stephens, was captured in Dublin. Kelley, with John Devoy and others, rescued Stephens from Richmond jail, and much to the consternation of Dublin Castle. Fenian General John H. Gleason was the ad interim head centre until after the springing of Stephens. Kelley arranged their harrowing escape from Ireland via Collier to Kilmarnock in Scotland, thence by rail to London, whence to Paris, and ultimately to America. In May 1866, Stephens, then in New York, appointed Thomas Kelley as his deputy. After the visionary organizer Stephens stepped down on 29 December 1866, now Colonel Kelley, the pragmatic military man, became COIR, that is, Chief Organizer of the Irish Republic, virtually established, and leader of the Fenian Brotherhood, IRB. Kelley promptly sailed for England and Ireland in January 1867 to assess the situation, organize, and plan for a rising. Colonel Kelley and Captain Timothy Deasy were arrested in Manchester, coming out of a wake. Somebody had obviously said something they shouldn't have. On the 18th of September 1867, they were rescued from a prison van by a group of bold Fenian men in what has become known to history as the smashing of the van. During the rescue, a policeman, Sergeant Brett, was accidentally killed. How do we know it was accidental? Because there was a lot of noise. And Sergeant Brett wanted to know what was going on. He says, "What's going on out there?" And they couldn't figure it out. Meanwhile, the fellow outside, a fellow named Rice, one of the Fenians, had raised his pistol. He says, "Get back from the door. I'm going to blow the lock." And Sergeant Brett said, "What'd you say?" Boom. Okay. It was not intentional, but gee whiz. Anyway, Kelley and Deasy escaped to America. Now, they went different ways because it wouldn't do to lose them both at once. And there were nearly 80 arrests, 27 charged. 5 Irishmen, none of whom had fired the shot, were condemned to death after a hasty show trial. One turned out to be an uninvolved Royal Marine who, after a campaign by journalists who had attended the trial, was released. Another, Captain Edward Omar Condon, a U.S. citizen and veteran of Corcoran's Irish Legion, at the request of the American consul, had his sentence commuted to life at hard labor. Condon would be released 11 years later at the request of U.S. President Hayes, who acted on a unanimous resolution of Congress. Anybody here ever witness a unanimous resolution of Congress? Anyhow, later the author of The Irish Race in America, Condon now lies in Calvary Cemetery in the Bronx. At the trial in Manchester, Condon was asked if he had anything to say. He replied, "I have nothing to retract, nothing to take back. I can only say, God save Ireland." God save Ireland, repeated the 3 men beside him. Those men, William Philip Allen, Michael Larkin, and Captain Michael O'Brien, American citizen and Civil War veteran, were hanged on the cold, damp, foggy morning of the 23rd of November, 1867. The Manchester Martyrs. T.D. Sullivan would be inspired to write God Save Ireland, which became a virtual national anthem for Ireland until superseded by Oran na Bhíon during Easter 1916. Patriot graves are the hallowed resting places of heroes, and as such due all respect. The proper keeping of such graves is an obligation of the living, not only to the occupants of such graves, but also to our posterity, who might better remember and learn from the example of our heroes and of those who keep their memory green. Major General Thomas, still on active duty, died at the Presidio in San Francisco in 1870. He was buried in the Oakwood Cemetery, right here behind me, in Troy, New York, hometown of his wife, Frances Lucretia Kellogg. Kellogg thing is here. Her grave is a small one back behind me. His record with the Army of the Cumberland throughout the war can only be described as decisive. Both President Ulysses S. Grant and General-in-Chief William Tecumseh Sherman, on their own initiative, were among the 10,000 mourners who were here for his burial. Now, Sherman, that is, William Tecumseh Sherman, said, during the whole war, his, meaning Thomas, services were transcendent. His monument, which is behind me there, was sculpted by Robert E. Lambert. The original headstone on the grave of Colonel Thomas J. Kelley of the Fenian Brotherhood, born on 6 January 1833, died 5 February 1908, in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, was found after the 2007 Friends of Irish Freedom and Sean O'Glenagher 1916 commemoration to be melting under the impact of a century of acid rain. Action was needed lest the only remaining locator of the grave of Thomas Kelley would be in a cemetery computer database. Now, what changed is, used to be there was some congressman down in Georgia who owned, whose district had a big quarry, but it was the wrong kind of stuff. Hence, a century of acid rain. He died, and the Army is now coming up with polished granite. Under the leadership of Martin Lyons of Linnamati, a group of kindred spirits, including Kevin Kennedy of Galway, Martin Galvin, Esquire of the Bronx, former editor of the Irish People, Liam Murphy of the AOH, that's me, and Charlie Laverty of the Moy in Tyrone, who's President Emeritus of the New York Irish History Roundtable, assisted by the Admiral Warden, Post 150 of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, and by Susan Olson and the staff of Woodlawn Cemetery, decided to replace Thomas Kelley's stone with a more durable polished granite stone befitting an American soldier and an Irish hero, in order that Kelley might be better remembered on both sides of the Atlantic and wherever green is born. Sinead.
Thank you, Liam.